My family called me ugly, pushed me out of every photo, and spent my settlement money on my sister's dream wedding. I didn't expose them, but one speech did what my silence never could. My name is Nola Quenby, and I was 28 years old when my sister's wedding became the day my family's most protected lie finally stood up in front of everyone. For most of my life, my parents called me ugly without always using the word. Sometimes it was a look. Sometimes it was the way my mother tilted my chin away from a camera. Sometimes it was the way my father said, "Stand on the end, sweetheart," so half my face would disappear from family photos. But when my sister Bristol got engaged, they stopped pretending. They spent $85,000 on her wedding, told me not to bring my fiance because the guest list was carefully balanced, and asked me to sit near the vendor entrance where the photographer would not catch too many close ups of my scar. I thought that would be the worst part of the day. I thought I would survive another family humiliation, go home to the man who loved me, and finally stop hoping my parents would see me. I was wrong. The worst part came later, when the groom stood with a champagne glass in his hand, looked across the room at me, and said, "Before I thank my bride, I need to thank the woman who unknowingly paid for this wedding." I need to go back before I tell you what happened after that sentence, because the truth did not begin at Stone Orchard Hall in Burlington, Vermont. It began 17 years earlier, in the old storage room behind our family garage with a box of beauty pageant ribbons, 3 vanilla candles, and a little girl who was always told she was beautiful. My older sister Bristol was born for photographs. That was what my mother, Corinne, always said. Bristol had pale gold hair, gray-green eyes, and the kind of smile people described as expensive before she was old enough to understand what money was. My mother dressed her in white lace, curled her hair before school picture day, and entered her in every local pageant from Burlington to Montpelier. My father, Dawson, kept a framed photo of Bristol in his insurance office, right beside his business license. When clients asked about his family, he pointed to her first. "That's our Bristol," he would say, with pride softening his whole face. Then, if he remembered me, he added, "And we have another daughter, Nola. She's very quiet." I was not born scarred. That part matters. There are childhood pictures of me before the fire, but you would never know it from the albums my mother kept in the living room. Those albums held Bristol's first crown, Bristol's first dance recital, Bristol holding tulips in a yellow dress, Bristol laughing under an apple tree, Bristol with frosting on her cheeks at her 7th birthday. My pictures were tucked into envelopes in a drawer, not thrown away. That would have looked cruel, just hidden, like evidence nobody wanted guests to find. Before the fire, I had a round face, dark hair that never stayed smooth, and brown eyes my grandmother once called warm as maple syrup. After the fire, I had a raised scar that ran from just below my left cheekbone to the edge of my jaw. It did not cover my whole face, but in my mother's eyes, it covered everything. From that year forward, my identity became one word she never said in public but breathed into every room I entered: damaged. The official family version was simple. I had been careless. I had gone into the storage room alone, played near an old heater, and knocked something over. The fire started fast. Bristol screamed. My parents rushed out. The fire department came. I survived with burns and smoke in my lungs. Bristol survived without a mark. That version followed me for 17 years. It explained the scar. It explained the pity. It explained why my mother always sighed when I pulled my hair behind my ear, but it was not true. The real version was this. Bristol wanted to take vintage pageant pictures with her ribbons, so she dragged me into the storage room and lit 3 candles because she said candlelight made everyone prettier. I told her we were not supposed to. She rolled her eyes and said, "You're always scared." Then a curtain caught, the old paper boxes went up, and Bristol froze. I still remember the way she stood there, one hand covering her mouth, while black smoke curled above her head. I ran toward her. I shoved her through the side door. A burning piece of fabric hit my face before I got out. That was the moment I became ugly in the family that should have called me brave. My parents knew the truth. They knew because Bristol told them before the ambulance arrived. She was shaking so hard her little teeth clicked together, and I heard her crying into my mother's coat. "I didn't mean to light them." My mother looked at me on the stretcher, then looked back at Bristol's perfect face, and something cold settled in her eyes. By the next morning, the truth had changed. My father told the fire investigator I had been in the room first. My mother told neighbors I was always curious about things I shouldn't touch. Bristol was only 11, they said. It was better not to ruin her future over an accident. I was 11 too, but nobody seemed worried about my future. I learned early that families do not always protect the child who gets hurt. Sometimes they protect the child who looks better crying. If you're listening to this and thinking no parent could do that, I understand. I spent years telling myself the same thing. I told myself they were scared, confused, ashamed, maybe even sorry in a way they did not know how to show. But excuses get heavy when you carry them for other people. By high school, I had mastered the art of disappearing. I wore my hair over the left side of my face. I stood at the edge of group pictures. I laughed when Bristol's friends called me mysterious because it sounded kinder than scarred. My mother corrected my posture but never corrected anyone who stared. She bought Bristol expensive skincare and told me drugstore moisturizer was fine because your issues are not really cosmetic. My father paid for Bristol's modeling portfolio, but made me fill out scholarship forms for art classes. When I won a local stained glass competition at 16, my certificate stayed in my backpack for 3 days because everyone was busy driving Bristol to a bridal boutique shoot. That was the first time I realized talent does not make noise in a house built to worship beauty. Stained glass became the only place where broken things made sense to me. I loved the cutting, the shaping, the careful pressure needed to turn sharp pieces into something that caught light. By 28, I worked at a restoration studio near Church Street Marketplace, repairing old church windows, antique lamps, and cracked panels from historic Vermont homes. I did not make a lot of money, but I loved the work. The glass did not ask why it had broken. It did not pretend the cracks were shameful. You cleaned the edges, soldered the seams, held it up to the sun, and suddenly, the damage became part of the design. That was where I met Benton Voss. He was a paramedic who brought in a broken stained glass sun catcher from his late mother's kitchen. He had big hands, tired eyes, and the softest voice I had ever heard from someone who had seen so many emergencies. He noticed my scar on our second date, not because he stared, but because I tried to hide it when the cafe lights got too bright. He reached across the table, gently touched my wrist, and said, "You don't have to disappear with me." Benton loved me in a way that felt almost suspicious at first. He remembered small details. He brought me coffee before early restoration jobs. He sent me pictures of old windows when he passed them on ambulance calls. He never told me I was beautiful like he was trying to fix something. He said it like it was already true. When he proposed, it was in my studio after closing, under a half-repaired church window that painted blue and gold across the floor. He held his grandmother's ring between two fingers and looked more nervous than any man who had pulled people from wrecked cars had a right to look. "Nola," he said, "I don't want a perfect life. I want an honest one with you." I said yes before he finished the sentence. For 2 whole weeks, I kept that happiness safe from my family. Then Bristol got engaged, and my happiness became small in their hands. Bristol's fiancé was Griffin Astor, an architect from a respected family on the other side of Lake Champlain. He was not loud rich like people who needed you to see their watches. He was quiet rich, old house rich, the kind of man who knew the history of every stone building downtown and still helped stack chairs after a charity event. I liked him the first time I met him, which made everything harder later. He was polite to me, not in the fake way people use when they are trying not to look at your face, but in a normal human way. He asked about my work. He listened when I explained how old glass bends with time. Bristol kept interrupting, sliding her hand through his arm, pulling the conversation back to flowers, venues, and her dress. My mother watched them like she was seeing her own dreams return younger and prettier. The wedding announcement dinner happened at my parents' house on a cold March night. My mother had set the table with her good plates, the ones she normally saved for people she wanted to impress. Bristol wore cream silk and kept flashing her ring under the chandelier. My father opened a bottle of wine he had been saving for years. Stone Orchard Hall had a cancellation for October, my mother announced, almost breathless. The lake view, the restored barn, the chandeliers, everything, we had to take it. Bristol smiled like a queen accepting land. "It's going to be intimate," she said, "only 170 guests." My father laughed as if that was modest. Then my mother said the number. "The whole thing will be around 85,000, but honestly, for Bristol, it is worth it." She said those last words while looking directly at me, as if she had been waiting all my life to measure us in dollars. I felt Benton's ring under my sleeve. I had planned to tell them gently, maybe after dessert, maybe when everyone was in a good mood. Instead, the words came out because I was tired of shrinking. "Benton and I are engaged too," I said. The table went still. Bristol blinked first, My father looked down at his plate. My mother's smile stayed in place, but it became thinner, colder. Well, she said, that is unexpected. I waited for congratulations. I waited for a hug. I waited for anything. Bristol tilted her head. That paramedic? She asked. Yes, I said. That paramedic. My mother folded her napkin with slow precision. Nola, sweetheart, this is Bristol's season. Some weddings are investments, some are just ceremonies. I'm sure you and Benton will do something simple that suits you. That suits you. In our family, that meant small enough not to embarrass them. Benton was not at that dinner, and I was grateful because I did not want him to hear the silence that followed. My father finally cleared his throat and said, Congratulations, kiddo, without looking at me. Kiddo. I was 28 and newly engaged, but in that room, I was still the burned little girl who had learned not to expect too much. Bristol reached across the table and touched my hand with fingers cold from her diamond. Maybe after my wedding, Mom can give you some ideas, she said. Nothing too formal, something sweet. I smiled because my body knew how to survive before my mind caught up. That night, Benton found me sitting on the bathroom floor with my hair pulled over my scar. He did not ask what happened. He just sat beside me and said, Your scar is not damaged, Nola. It is evidence that you survived. I wanted to believe him. I was not there yet. After that, Bristol turned me into free labor with the warm confidence of someone who had never been told no. She wanted handmade stained glass table numbers, little apple-shaped ornaments for guests, candle holders that would glow amber under the barn lights, and a welcome sign with pressed flowers sealed behind glass. You're so good at these things, she said, standing in my studio with her sunglasses on top of her head. And honestly, it will be meaningful. Sisters helping sisters. She said sisters like it was a pretty ribbon she could tie around unpaid work. I should have refused. Instead, I said yes, because some foolish part of me still believed effort could earn love. For 3 months, I worked after hours cutting glass until my fingers ached. Bristol posted pictures online of custom wedding details without mentioning my name once. When someone commented, Your artist is amazing, she replied, I know, right? I have such an eye for design. The closer the wedding came, the smaller my place in it became. My mother called to discuss my dress and used the same careful tone she used when scheduling dental cleanings. Dark colors are best for you, she said. Nothing shiny, and please wear your hair forward. The photographer is very editorial. Editorial meant expensive. Expensive meant unforgiving. Can Benton come too? I asked. There was a pause long enough to answer before she spoke. We had to make difficult choices. Griffin has a large family, and Bristol's guest list is already tight. I'm sure Benton understands. He did understand. He understood perfectly. They want you alone because you are easier to control that way, he said. I defended them out of habit. It's just one day. Benton looked at me with that paramedic calm, the kind he used when something was bleeding and someone was pretending it wasn't. Nola, it has never been just one day. The first crack in the wedding came through an email. It was from Mavis Rook, the planner, a sharp little woman with silver hair, red glasses, and the energy of someone who could organize a hurricane. She meant to send me updated measurements for the table displays, but attached the wrong file. I opened it at my studio while eating soup from a paper cup. At first, it looked like normal wedding paperwork: venue deposit, floral balance, catering schedule, rental chairs, lighting, photographer. Then my eyes stopped on a payment line. Source: Quenby Medical Settlement Reserve. I read it 3 times before the words became real. Quenby, Medical, Settlement, Reserve, my settlement, my burn settlement. The account my parents said had been mostly used for hospital bills, surgeries, therapy, and family expenses during a difficult time. The account I had not asked about in years because every time I did, my father looked wounded and my mother said money talk was ugly. I called my father first. He answered from his office, cheerful, until he heard my voice. Nola, everything okay? I asked him what the Quenby Medical Settlement Reserve was. Silence, not confusion, not surprise. Silence with a door closing inside it. Where did you hear that? He said. My hand tightened around the phone. Why is Bristol's wedding being paid from it? He sighed like I had created a problem by noticing one. That account was always complicated. It was mine, I said. It was for my injury. His voice hardened. Your injury affected the whole family. We all suffered. I laughed once, not because it was funny, but because something inside me cracked cleanly. You used money from my burned face to pay for her flowers? Don't be dramatic, he said. That money was always family money. There it was, the sentence that told me everything. In my family, my pain belonged to everyone except me. Benton came over that night and found every document I had saved in an old folder. Hospital discharge papers, therapy records, a letter from a law office I barely remembered, and a faded copy of a settlement notice with my name on it. I had been a minor, so my parents had controlled the funds. Benton did not pretend to be a lawyer. He simply laid the papers on my kitchen table, took pictures, and said, "You need someone who understands this." I was scared. Not of legal words, but of what I might discover. It is one thing to know your family does not value you. It is another to see a dollar amount attached to it. I wanted to call Bristol to ask if she knew. Then I remembered her custom dress fitting, her Lakeview venue, the way she had smiled while asking me to make free decorations. Maybe she did not know. Maybe she did. Both possibilities hurt. What I did not know then was that Griffin had started seeing cracks too. During a venue walkthrough 2 weeks before the wedding, Bristol stood under the applewood beams of Stone Orchard Hall while the photographer discussed family portraits. I was kneeling near a table, checking whether the glass numbers caught enough light from the windows. Bristol thought I was too far away to hear her. "Just keep Nola out of the main shots," she said lightly. "A few family pictures are fine, but nothing close. I don't want the whole gallery looking like a charity campaign." The photographer gave an awkward laugh. My mother said, "We'll position her carefully." I kept my eyes on the glass, because if I looked up, I might shatter something. Across the room, Griffin heard every word. His face changed, not dramatically, but enough. Later, he walked over and said, "The table pieces are beautiful, Nola." Bristol called his name before I could answer. Mavis, the planner, was the next person to notice. She was balancing final payments when Griffin asked why a medical reserve had paid the venue. Mavis did not gossip, but she did not like dirty paperwork either. She told him only what she could. Several vendor payments had come through accounts connected to Dawson Quenby, but one source line showed a reserve in my name. Griffin took that question to his best man, Cormac Sutter, a forensic accountant with a face so calm it made other people nervous. Cormac followed the trail quietly. The venue deposit came from the reserve. The floral balance came from the reserve. The custom dress deposit went through my father's business account 2 days after a transfer from the reserve. The lighting, the cake, even the champagne fountain Bristol joked was too iconic to skip, had pieces of my settlement underneath them. But the money was not the only thing Cormac found. Buried in an old insurance file was the original fire report. Cause of origin, open flame from candles near fabric storage, not heater malfunction, not careless child. Candles. Griffin took everything to his grandfather, Alden Astor, a retired probate judge who lived in a white farmhouse outside Shelburne. Alden was 78, sharp as winter air, and famous in his family for saying little until it mattered. He read the documents twice. Then he removed his glasses and looked at his grandson. "This is not wedding drama," he said. "This is financial abuse." Griffin asked him what he should do. Alden looked toward the window, where the lake was dark under a cloudy sky. "If you marry into a lie, you become part of its protection." That sentence stayed with Griffin. I know because he told me months later. At the time, I knew none of this. I only knew my stomach hurt every time I looked at Bristol's glass ornaments drying on my workbench. The rehearsal dinner was held in a private room above a restaurant near the waterfront. Exposed brick, tiny candles, white flowers, framed pictures of old Burlington streets. My mother wore pearl earrings and a dress the color of champagne. Bristol wore white, of course, because every room had to practice being her wedding. I came alone. Benton had offered to pick me up whenever I wanted to leave. "Text me a period if you can't call," he said, "just one dot, and I'll be outside." I loved him for that. At dinner, my mother stood to give a speech. She spoke about Bristol's grace, Bristol's beauty, Bristol's generous heart, Bristol's bright future with Griffin. Then she smiled toward the far end of the table where I had been placed beside a cousin I had not seen in 9 years. "And Nola helped with the little glass pieces," she added. She has always been useful with her hands. Useful, not talented, not strong, not loved. Useful like scissors or tape. People clapped politely. Bristol lifted her glass without looking at me. Griffin did. His eyes moved from me to my mother, then to Bristol, and I saw something settle in him. Not anger exactly. Decision. After dinner, he found me near the hallway where I was pretending to study a painting. Nola, he said quietly, did anyone ever tell you the table pieces are the most honest thing about this wedding? I did not know what to do with that sentence. Glass usually is, I said. He looked like he wanted to say more, but Bristol appeared behind him, sliding an arm through his. There you are, she said. Daddy wants a picture. She noticed he had been talking to me and her mouth tightened. Careful, she joked. Nola will make you discuss window repairs all night. Griffin did not smile. That was when I first wondered if he knew something, but I had no idea how much. The morning of the wedding was gray, cold, and beautiful, in the way Vermont can be when autumn is almost finished. Mist hovered over Lake Champlain. The apple trees around Stone Orchard Hall had lost most of their leaves, leaving dark branches against a pale sky. Inside, the restored barn glowed with amber lights and white flowers. Chandeliers hung from applewood beams. Every table held my glass numbers and ornaments, each one catching tiny pieces of gold. I should have felt proud. Instead, I felt like I had built decorations for my own erasure. My mother found me near the side entrance, where the planner had placed a chair for me beside two vendor assistants. She looked me over and frowned. I wore a navy dress Benton loved, simple and clean, with my hair pulled back from my face. For once, my scar was fully visible. Your hair, she whispered. Pull it forward. The scar is showing. I looked at her for a long second. Then I reached up, tightened the clip, and said, I know. The ceremony itself was almost perfect, which somehow made it worse. Bristol walked down the aisle in a dress that cost more than my car. Lace sleeves, long train, tiny pearl buttons down her back. People turned to watch her like sunrise had entered the room. My father cried when he gave her away, real tears shining on his cheeks. I tried not to wonder what it would feel like to be loved loudly. Griffin stood at the altar, handsome and pale, his eyes fixed on Bristol with an expression I could not read. Not joy, not grief, something controlled. When the minister spoke about honesty, Griffin's jaw tightened. When Bristol promised to cherish him, Alden Astor closed his eyes. They said their vows. They exchanged rings. Everyone clapped. But I noticed one thing. When the minister handed them the marriage license folder to sign after the ceremony, Griffin did not pick up the pen. He said something softly to the minister, and the folder was moved aside. The reception began with music and maple-glazed appetizers and waiters moving between tables like nothing was wrong. Bristol laughed too loudly. My mother floated through the room, accepting compliments, as if she had personally designed happiness. My father shook hands with Griffin's relatives, sweating through the collar of his shirt. I sat near the side door, close enough to the kitchen to hear plates being stacked. Every few minutes, someone praised the glass pieces and asked who made them. Bristol's answer changed depending on who asked. A local artist, a custom vendor, someone Mom found. Not once did she say my name. I texted Benton under the table. I want to leave after speeches. He replied, I'll be in the lot, no rush, no questions. I stared at those words until my eyes burned. After the first dance, Mavis tapped a spoon against a glass and announced that Griffin wanted to say a few words. Bristol looked delighted. She loved speeches about herself. She adjusted her veil, touched her hair, and leaned slightly toward him, ready to be adored. Griffin stood at the center of the room with a champagne glass in one hand and a folded paper in the other. Behind him, the Lakeview windows had gone dark, turning the room into a reflection of itself. Thank you all for being here, he began. His voice was steady, warm enough that nobody sensed danger. A wedding is supposed to be a beginning. Two families, two histories, two lives brought into one promise. People smiled. My mother dabbed her eyes with a napkin. Griffin looked at Bristol, then at my parents. But a promise built on hidden harm is not a beginning. It is a continuation of something rotten. The room changed. You could feel it, like air pressure before a storm. Bristol's smile froze. My father's hand tightened around his glass. Griffin unfolded the paper. Before I thank my bride, he said, I need to thank the woman who unknowingly paid for this wedding. My body went cold before he said my name. Nola Quenby. Every face turned toward me. For one terrible second, I was 11 again, smoke in my lungs, adults deciding what my pain would be called. Griffin continued. The venue, flowers, lighting, dress deposits, and several other expenses for this $85,000 event were paid through a medical settlement reserve created for Nola after she was injured as a child. Someone gasped. My mother stood halfway up. Griffin, this is not appropriate. He did not look at her. No, Corinne. What was not appropriate was using money meant for burn recovery to buy centerpieces. Bristol whispered, Stop. It came out small and sharp. Griffin turned to her. Did you know? She shook her head too quickly. Cormac stepped forward from the edge of the room and placed a folder on the table in front of Alden. Griffin lifted another page. Transfers were made by Dawson Quenby. Some were routed through his insurance business account. Bristol was copied on at least 2 vendor emails discussing payment timing. My father stood, face gray. This is a misunderstanding. Alden Astor's voice cut through the room, calm and old, and impossible to ignore. Sit down, Dawson. My father sat. Griffin took a breath, and for the first time his voice almost broke. But the money is not the only lie. The room was so silent I could hear a fork slide off someone's plate. For 17 years, Nola was told her scar came from her own carelessness. The original fire report says the fire started from candles placed near fabric storage. Nola did not start that fire. He looked at Bristol. Bristol did. My sister's face went white under her perfect makeup. My mother made a sound like a wounded animal. Griffin continued, each word slower than the last. Nola ran into smoke and pulled Bristol out. She was burned, saving the sister who later let this family call her ugly. I cannot fully describe what happened inside me then. It was not joy. It was not revenge. It was like a locked room and my chest opened, and all the air rushed in at once. People were staring at my scar now, but for the first time they were not seeing damage. They were seeing evidence. Bristol stood so fast her chair fell backward. I was a child, she cried. I was scared. Griffin nodded once. Yes, you were a child when it happened. But you were not a child when you let your sister make your wedding decorations for free. You were not a child when you hid her from photos. You were not a child when you let her settlement pay for this room. Bristol's eyes filled with tears, but they were angry tears. You're humiliating me. Griffin looked around the room, at the flowers, the chandeliers, the glass ornaments, the guests holding their breath. No, he said quietly. I am refusing to marry the humiliation you built for someone else. Chaos arrived all at once. My mother dropped her champagne glass, and it shattered across the floor. My father lunged toward the folder, but Cormac moved faster, sliding it away while Alden rose with surprising strength for a man his age. Mavis stood near the sound table, one hand over her mouth, her red glasses crooked. Guests whispered, then spoke, then pulled out phones. Bristol grabbed Griffin's sleeve. We can talk about this privately. He gently removed her hand. You had 17 years to talk privately. She looked at me then, really looked, maybe for the first time all day. Her face twisted. You knew? I shook my head. No. My voice sounded strange, calm, and distant. But I knew one day the truth would get tired of being buried. My mother pushed through the space between tables and grabbed my arm. Her fingers dug into the same place they always did when she wanted obedience. Nola, tell them this is family business, she hissed. Tell them Griffin is confused. I looked down at her hand, then back at her face. For years, I had wanted that face to soften for me. In that moment, I only wanted her hand off my skin. Would you like me to tell them the family version? I asked. The one where I burned myself being careless? The one where Bristol stayed perfect and I became the problem? Her mouth opened. No words came. You called me ugly for the scar I got saving the daughter you chose. The sentence landed between us like a final bill. My father came next. He looked smaller than I had ever seen him. His tie loose, his forehead shining. Nola, we can explain. I almost laughed. You had 17 years. He flinched. It was complicated. No, I said. Glasswork is complicated. Healing is complicated. What you did was simple. You protected Bristol from consequences and used my pain as a bank account. Bristol was crying now, but even her crying felt practiced, like some part of her still expected the room to return to her. Nola, please, she said. You're my sister. I turned to her, and the whole room seemed to fade except her face and mine. I was your sister when I ran into smoke for you. I was your sister when I kept quiet because I thought maybe you were scared. I was your sister when I made every piece of glass in this room. I stopped being your sister only when I stopped being useful. Griffin walked to the small table where the marriage license folder sat untouched. He picked it up, opened it, and showed the unsigned line. "This license will not be filed," he said. His voice was tired now, but firm. "My family attorney will contact the Quenbys regarding the financial records. As for the wedding, I'm sorry to everyone who came here expecting a celebration." He looked at me again, and there was no pity in his eyes, only respect. "Nola, I am sorry this truth had to come out in a room that tried to hide you." That was when I almost cried. Not when my parents were exposed, not when Bristol's perfect day collapsed, but when someone apologized for the hiding. I left before dessert, before the cake could be cut, before my mother could ask me to comfort Bristol. Outside, the air was sharp and clean. The parking lot lights reflected on wet pavement. Benton was leaning against his truck in his dark jacket, hands in his pockets, like he had been holding the world steady until I came out. He took one look at my face and opened his arms. I walked into them without speaking. For a few minutes, I just breathed against his chest while music thudded faintly from the barn behind us. "How bad?" he asked softly. I pulled back and wiped my eyes. The truth stood up. He looked past me toward the glowing windows, where shadows moved like a storm inside. "Good," he said. Not cruelly, not happily, just good. The aftermath did not feel like victory at first. It felt like paperwork, phone calls, and exhaustion. Griffin's family attorney contacted a lawyer for me before the weekend ended. Cormac gave copies of the financial trail to my attorney. The reserve account still had some money left, but much less than it should have. My father's insurance license came under review because of how he had moved funds through his business. My mother called 14 times in 2 days. I answered once. She cried. She said Griffin had destroyed Bristol. She said people were talking. She said the wedding video was online that everyone had seen, that Bristol would never recover from such public shame. I listened until she ran out of breath. Then I said, "You are still talking about Bristol's pain like it is bigger than mine?" She went quiet. "I don't know how to fix this," she whispered. "Start by not asking me to make it easier for you," I said, and hung up. Bristol texted me 3 days later. "You ruined my life." I stared at those words for a long time. 17 years of silence had lived between us, and that was what she chose to send. Not "I'm sorry," not "thank you for saving me," not "I should have told the truth," just accusation. I typed slowly because my hands were shaking. No, I stopped paying for it. Then I blocked her for a while. Not forever, I told myself. Just long enough to breathe without her voice in my head. My attorney filed a civil claim for misuse of settlement funds. My parents agreed to a repayment plan before it reached court, mostly because Alden Astor's statement made it clear the records were strong. They sold a lake cabin I had only visited twice as a child because Bristol needed quiet weekends, more than I did. I did not feel sorry when the sale went through. People in Burlington talked because small cities have long memories and fast mouths. Some were kind, some were curious. A few came into my studio pretending to need repairs just so they could see my face. That part was hard, but something had changed in me after Griffin's speech. I stopped wearing my hair forward. At first, it felt like walking outside without skin. Then it felt like relief. Customers looked at my scar, then looked away, then looked back at the glass in my hands. Life continued. The old church windows still needed repair, broken lamps still needed solder, sun still came through colored glass whether people approved of it or not. 3 months later, Benton and I got married in the small courtyard behind my studio. There were 27 guests, folding chairs, hot cider, and a stained glass sun catcher I made myself hanging from an iron hook above us. It was shaped like a maple leaf, with a thin red line running through one side. Not hidden, not corrected, part of the design. I wore a simple ivory dress from a secondhand shop and pinned my hair back so tightly there was no chance of it falling across my scar. Benton cried before I even reached him. When he said his vows, his voice shook. "I choose all of you," he said. "The parts that healed clean, the parts that didn't, and every brave piece in between." Then, in front of everyone, he kissed the scar on my cheek. Not to prove a point. Not for drama. Just because it was part of the face he loved. My parents were not invited. That surprises some people when I tell them, but peace sometimes needs a locked door. My father sent a letter. It said he was sorry, not only for the money, but for the silence. My mother sent nothing for a long time. Then 6 months after Bristol's wedding that never became a marriage, I received a small envelope with no return address. Inside was one photograph. It was old and smoke-damaged around the edges. Me at 10 years old before the fire, laughing with maple syrup on my chin. On the back, in my mother's handwriting, were 6 words. "I should have seen you then. I cried when I read it, but I did not call her. Some apologies are beginnings. Some are just proof that the past finally found a mirror. As for Bristol, I heard she moved to Portland, Maine and started working at a small clothing shop under her middle name. Griffin stayed in Vermont and eventually sent me a short note through Mavis. It said, "Thank you for making honest glass for a dishonest room." I kept that note in my studio drawer, not because I needed Griffin's approval, but because it reminded me that sometimes strangers see what family refuses to name. Alden passed away the following winter. Before he died, he sent my lawyer a signed statement about what he had reviewed. Even at the end, he was helping the truth stay standing. For years, I thought my scar made me the ugly one. I believed it because the people who raised me repeated it in 100 quiet ways. But I understand something now. The ugliest thing in our house was never my face. It was the lie. It was the way my parents protected beauty and punished courage. It was the way Bristol accepted a crown made from my silence. I do not hate them every day. Hate takes energy I would rather use for living, but I do not excuse them anymore either. There is a difference between bitterness and memory. I remember, so I do not hand them the knife again. If there is anything I want you to take from what happened to me, it is this. Do not let people define you by the wound they caused or the wound they failed to protect. Your pain is not their property. Your silence is not their shelter. And if you have spent years waiting for someone to finally see you, maybe the first person who needs to look clearly is you. I was not ugly. I was injured. I was not weak. I was loyal to people who used my loyalty against me. I was not hidden because I had no worth. I was hidden because my truth made their favorite lie look shameful. That wedding cost $85,000. My sister never got the marriage. My parents lost the image they had polished for years. And me? I got my name back, my money back, and my face back. I walk into rooms now with my hair pulled away from my cheek. Some people still stare. Let them. The scar they called ugly is the proof that I survived a fire, a family, and a lifetime of being pushed out of frame. And honestly, being seen clearly is worth more than any perfect wedding ever could be. The end. Commentary, analysis, explanation, and life lessons. Let's step away from the dramatic wedding scene for a moment and examine what this whole narrative is really showing us. Because underneath the expensive venue, the broken family image, the public speech, and the shocking financial betrayal, there is a much deeper emotional question. What happens to a person when the people who should have protected them decide to edit their pain out of the family picture? Nola's life was not destroyed in one day. That is the first thing we need to understand. Her pain was built slowly, almost invisibly, through years of comparison, silence, selective affection, and emotional exclusion. Her parents did not simply wake up one morning and decide to hurt her. They created a family system where Bristol was treated like a public achievement, while Nola was treated like a private inconvenience. That kind of damage is especially dangerous because it does not always look violent from the outside. It can look polite, it can sound gentle, it can hide behind phrases like, "Stand over there," "Wear your hair this way," "Don't make this difficult," or "You know how your sister is." But the result is still devastating. The scar on Nola's face is not just a physical mark, it is the central symbol of the entire piece. At first, the family uses that scar as evidence against her. They act as if it lowers her value. They treat it like something shameful, something that must be covered, softened, hidden, or kept away from photographs. But as the truth unfolds, the scar changes meaning. It becomes evidence of sacrifice. It becomes the visible proof of a hidden moral crime. It shows that Nola was not the careless child, not the damaged daughter, not the ugly one. She was the child who ran into danger while everyone else protected the image of the prettier daughter. That reversal is extremely important. The family's entire lie depends on controlling the meaning of Nola's scar. If the scar means Nola was careless, then the family can pity her and blame her. If the scar means Nola saved Bristol, then the whole family has to confront its own cowardice. So they choose the first meaning. They rewrite the event. They make Nola carry shame that never belonged to her. And this is where the emotional cruelty becomes deeper than ordinary favoritism. They do not only prefer Bristol, they build Bristol's innocence on Nola's humiliation. Corinne, the mother, represents a specific kind of parental failure, aesthetic obsession mixed with moral blindness. She does not simply admire beauty, she worships it. She measures worth through presentation, social appeal, photographs, elegance, and public approval. In her mind, Bristol is the daughter who can be displayed, while Nola is the daughter who has to be managed. This is why Corinne's cruelty feels so cold. She does not always shout, she does not need to. Her cruelty lives in arrangements, seating arrangements, photo arrangements, wedding arrangements, family arrangements. She places people where she believes they belong, and for years she places Nola at the edge. Dawson's failure is quieter, but not smaller. In many emotionally damaged families, the silent parent is often underestimated. People say, "At least he did not say those things." But silence can be an active choice. Dawson knew enough. He signed enough. He avoided enough. He allowed Corinne's version of reality to become the family's official language. And later, when we discover that he moved money from Nola's medical settlement reserve, his silence becomes something even worse: complicity. He is not just a weak father who failed to speak. He is a father who converted his daughter's injury into a financial resource for the child he preferred to protect. The money is one of the most disturbing parts of this narrative because it transforms emotional neglect into measurable exploitation. $85,000 is not merely a wedding budget here, it is a price tag placed on injustice. That money came from Nola's suffering. It was meant to support her recovery, her security, and her future. Instead, it was used to decorate Bristol's fantasy. Flowers, lighting, venue deposits, dress payments, and wedding details were all built on money connected to Nola's trauma. That makes the wedding almost grotesque beneath its elegance. The room looks beautiful, but its foundation is morally contaminated. Bristol's role is complicated, and that is what makes her more interesting than a simple villain. As a child, she may have been terrified. Children panic. Children make reckless choices. Children lie when they fear punishment. But Bristol did not remain a child. She grew into an adult who understood the benefits of silence. She accepted her parents' protection. She accepted the attention. She accepted the expensive wedding. She accepted Nola's free labor. She accepted the false version of the fire because it kept her untouched. That is where fear turns into selfishness. The original accident may have been childish, but the long-term silence was adult moral failure. One of the sharpest emotional details is how Bristol uses sisterhood only when she is losing control. When Nola is useful, Bristol accepts her labor. When Nola is embarrassing, Bristol hides her. When Nola's truth threatens the wedding, suddenly Bristol remembers the word sister. This is a familiar emotional tactic. Some people ignore the relationship when respect is required, but they invoke the relationship when accountability arrives. Nola's response cuts through that manipulation. She reminds Bristol that she already acted like a sister when it mattered most. She ran into smoke. She stayed silent. She gave help. She gave labor. But family cannot be a one-way debt that only the wounded person keeps paying. Griffin's speech functions as more than a dramatic reveal. It is a moral intervention. He is standing at the threshold of marriage, and he realizes that if he proceeds, he will not simply be marrying Bristol. He will be marrying into the machinery of the lie. He will become another person who benefits from Nola's erasure. That is why his decision matters. He chooses rupture over comfort. He chooses public discomfort over private corruption. He understands that a marriage beginning with stolen truth is already compromised before it starts. The phrase, "the woman who unknowingly paid for this wedding," is devastating because it collapses the illusion of the entire event in one sentence. Until that moment, everyone believes Bristol is the center of the room. The dress, the flowers, the speeches, the lighting, the attention, all of it seems to revolve around her, but Griffin's sentence shifts the center. Suddenly, the real emotional center is Nola, the woman seated near the side door, the woman the photographer was supposed to avoid, the woman whose pain financed the celebration. That is the reversal. The hidden person becomes the unavoidable truth. And notice Nola's composure when the truth comes out. She does not perform rage for the audience. She does not beg the guests to understand her. She does not collapse into a dramatic scene. Her calmness is not weakness, it is moral clarity. For years, she was forced to carry confusion. Was she overreacting? Was she too sensitive? Was her family really cruel, or was she imagining it? When the documents, the fire report, and the money trail appear, confusion ends. She no longer needs to argue for the legitimacy of her pain. The facts have entered the room. Her line to her mother is one of the emotional pillars of the whole piece. "You called me ugly for the scar I got saving the daughter you chose." This sentence is powerful because it does three things at once. First, it identifies the insult. Second, it reveals the truth behind the scar. Third, it exposes the family's favoritism. It is not a long speech, but it contains a lifetime of suppressed reality. Sometimes the strongest confrontation is not loud. Sometimes it is a sentence so accurate that nobody can escape it. The wedding collapse is not satisfying because Bristol suffers. That would be too shallow. It is satisfying because the false hierarchy finally collapses. For years, Bristol occupied the highest position in the family because of beauty, image, and parental preference. Nola occupied the lowest position because of a scar and a lie. At the wedding, that hierarchy is inverted. Bristol's beauty cannot protect her. Corinne's control cannot protect her. Dawson's paperwork cannot protect him. The room stops admiring the image and starts examining the truth. That is why the scene feels like justice. Still, the piece is careful not to make justice look simple. After the reveal, Nola does not instantly become healed. She has to deal with attorneys, documents, phone calls, public curiosity, family pressure, and emotional exhaustion. This is realistic. When a buried truth finally comes out, it can liberate you and drain you at the same time. There is relief, yes, but there is also grief. Nola has to grieve the family she wished she had. She has to accept that the apology she wanted may never arrive in the form she deserved. She has to build a life without waiting for the same people to finally become safe. Benton's presence gives the narrative emotional balance. He is not there to rescue Nola in a dramatic way. He does not take over her voice. He does not turn her pain into his hero moment. Instead, he gives her something much rarer: steadiness. He sees her without trying to redesign her. He loves her without asking her to hide. His love is restorative because it does not erase the scar. It makes room for it. That is a crucial difference. Real love does not demand a more acceptable version of you. Real love does not ask you to become easier to present. The final wedding between Nola and Benton is deliberately simple, and that simplicity is the point. Bristol's wedding had scale, expense, performance, and spectacle, but it lacked integrity. Nola's wedding has fewer guests, fewer decorations, and far less money, but it has honesty. That contrast tells us something important about life. Beauty without truth becomes decoration. Truth without luxury can still become peace. Nola does not need a room full of people pretending. She needs a small group of people who can look at her clearly and stay. The stained glass sun catcher at Nola's wedding is another meaningful symbol. Stained glass is made from pieces. It is cut, shaped, joined, and held together by seams. It does not pretend to be unbroken. Its beauty comes through the way light passes through its divisions. That is exactly what Nola becomes. She does not erase the injury. She does not pretend the past did not happen. She turns the visible line into part of her design. Her scar becomes not a defect, but a boundary between who she was told she was and who she now knows herself to be. There is a strong lesson here about family narratives. Every family tells stories about itself. Some families say, "We are loving." Some say, "We protect each other." Some say, "We only want what is best." But the real test is not what a family says about itself. The real test is how it treats the person with the least power in the room. In the Quenby family, Nola had the least power. She was young, injured, dependent, and emotionally isolated. Instead of protecting her, they used her silence. That reveals the truth of the family far more clearly than any polished wedding speech ever could. Another lesson is about the danger of image-based parenting. When parents turn one child into a symbol of success, that child can become entitled, fragile, or morally careless. When they turn another child into a symbol of inconvenience, that child may internalize shame that never belonged to them. Both children are harmed, but not equally. Bristol is corrupted by favoritism. Nola is wounded by rejection. The parents create the conditions for both outcomes. That is why comparison inside a family is not just unfair, it is destructive. The piece also teaches that accountability is not the same as cruelty. Griffin exposing the truth is painful, but the pain was not created by the exposure. The pain was created by the original actions and the years of concealment. People often blame the person who reveals the truth because revelation is loud, but the lie was already harmful before anyone spoke. The speech did not destroy a healthy wedding. It revealed that the wedding was already built on theft, silence, and deception. Nola's boundaries after the reveal are essential. She does not rush to comfort her mother. She does not accept Bristol's accusation. She does not invite her parents to her own wedding simply to look forgiving. This is important because many audiences are used to endings where the wounded person must become emotionally generous immediately. But healing does not require instant reconciliation. Forgiveness, if it comes, should not be forced. Access to your life is not automatically owed to people who harmed you. Nola's distance is not revenge. It is self-protection. The mother's later photograph and message add a subtle, more mature ending. Corinne does not suddenly transform into a perfect mother. She sends a damaged picture and 6 words. I should have seen you then. That is not enough to repair 17 years, but it is significant because it acknowledges the central failure. She did not see Nola, or more precisely, she chose not to see her clearly. Nola crying over the photo but not calling her mother is emotionally honest. Sometimes an apology touches you, but it does not automatically restore trust. Feeling something does not mean reopening the door. So what are the practical lessons here? First, never allow people to turn your wound into your identity. What happened to you may shape you, but it should not be used as a weapon against you. Second, be careful when someone only values you for what you provide. Nola's family valued her labor, her silence, and her money, but not her dignity. Third, truth needs documentation. The fire report, payment records, emails, and legal trail mattered because they protected reality from emotional manipulation. Fourth, love should make you more visible, not more hidden. There is also a lesson about self-perception. Nola believed for years that her scar made her less worthy because the people around her trained her to believe it. But other people's discomfort is not the same as truth. Their prejudice is not a mirror. Their shame is not your identity. Sometimes you have to stop asking the people who minimized you to explain your value. They are not reliable witnesses. By the end, Nola does not merely win a conflict. She reclaims authorship over her own life. That is the deeper victory. Her parents wrote one version of her: careless, scarred, unfortunate, less beautiful, less important. The truth writes another version: brave, exploited, resilient, clear-sighted, worthy. And finally, Nola chooses the second version. She walks into rooms with her hair pulled back. That small physical choice carries enormous emotional meaning. She is no longer arranging herself around other people's shame. This is why the narrative stays with us. It is not only about a wedding being ruined, it is about the collapse of a false reality. It asks us to think about how many people are living inside labels they never deserved. The ugly one, the difficult one, the jealous one, the dramatic one, the ungrateful one. Sometimes those labels are not descriptions. They are tools of control. They keep the wounded person quiet and the guilty person comfortable. Nola's journey reminds us that being seen clearly is more valuable than being displayed beautifully. Bristol was displayed for years, but not truly known. Nola was hidden for years, but her truth endured. In the end, the expensive wedding, the perfect dress, and the polished family image could not survive one honest speech. That is the power of truth when it finally enters a room where everyone has been trained to look away. And maybe the most important lesson is this: the part of you that someone else calls ugly may be the exact place where your strength is stored. Nola's scar was not the end of her beauty. It was the beginning of her testimony. It proved she had survived fire, betrayal, silence, and erasure. And once she understood that, nobody in her family had the power to hide her again.